Hello, welcome back to Growth from Grief. Sue Andersen here. In today's episode, I want to give you 7 movements, 7 actions that you can do today, right now, to release grief pain. So let's begin back with that grief blob that I described in episode 8. So if you haven't listened to episode 8, you can go back and listen to that episode. But briefly, the grief blob is how I imagine my grief would look if I could take that pain out of my body and look at it. And this blob or amoeba shape is the shape that resonates the most with me. And inside of this blob are all emotions that we could feel during our grief journey. And they're certainly all the emotions that we feel in our everyday life anyway, right? So there's nothing special about these emotions. They are the emotions that we would feel. But these emotions are going to be more intense at different times. They may last longer. So we may feel these emotions a little bit differently than perhaps before we experience this loss. Initially, right after you experience loss, you feel this intensity of emotion. It's very raw. Your feelings are very raw. You may notice that you're in disbelief, shock. It feels very, very intense, very raw. So when you are in this emotional rawness and intensity right at the beginning of your grief, you still need to take care of yourself. And what are the things that you can do at this stage? Well, they are things like breathing, a counting breath. So my first recommendation is to focus on a counting breath. And let's do this together. So we're going to inhale to a count of 3 and exhale to a count of 4. And our focus is on this counting. So I'll do the counting and you can do the following. We're going to inhale to a count of 3. So first let's take just a deep breath, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the nose, and then begin. 1, 2, 3, and then exhale through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Relax. Take regular, gentle breaths. Now, in those few moments, notice what you experienced. Did you feel a little bit calmer? Were you able to come inside of yourself? Just forget what's going on just for those few breaths. So this is a very relaxing breath. It takes us out of our head. It begins to calm the body, calm the mind. And that's what you need at certainly any stage of or any time during this grief journey, but especially in this initial intensity, intense emotions, this disbelief, this rawness. Just taking that time, inhaling and exhaling. And the beauty of this breath is you can do it anywhere. You're counting to yourself. You can do it in the car. You can do it at home. You can do it lying down. You can do it standing up, sitting. It doesn't matter. It's a way to find relief. And that's what you need. The other thing that you can do during this early phase, or early time of your grief journey, is to make a list of things that you want to do during the day. What do I mean by that? It is hard to remember anything. It's hard to remember that you should drink water. It's hard to remember that you should take a shower. It's hard to remember that you need to eat. I used to write a list, 3 things each day. Drink water, counting breath, eat food. That was my list. But it was something I could look at. It was something I could come back to. It was something I could do to care for myself. It's so important to find that self-care even at this early stage. So think about that. So think about this counting breath. Notice how it makes you feel. And think about just making a very, very short list. And of course, this is something you can do, again, anytime during your grief journey. But I think it's really useful at the beginning because of where we are mentally, physically, and emotionally. So drawing back to that image of the grief blob, as we move through our grief journey, emotions will kind of ebb and flow. You may feel sadness, and that might last for a long time. You might feel anger. These emotions are going to sort of pulsate. They're going to move back and forth, ebb and flow, echo. We might be going 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And there are times where we find our mind just swirling. You know these images of the hamster on the wheel. We just can't get that thought out of our head. So think about what is swirling. What are those thoughts that are swirling in your mind? Are you worried? Is worry something that's going on in your mind? Do you feel a lot of anger, guilt? How do you get these things out of your head? How do you release these thoughts? So Thich Nhat Hanh, in his book, he is, if you don't know Thich Nhat Hanh, he was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. And he talked a lot about mindfulness, and he taught about mindfulness and how important the breath is and being present with our emotions. So not letting emotions just be dismissed, but even really tough emotions, to just be present with them. So here is a practice that he recommends for being present with strong emotions. And I'm quoting here. When a painful emotion comes up, stop whatever you're doing and take care of it. Pay attention to what is happening. The practice is simple. Lie down, put your hand on your belly, and begin to breathe. Or sit on a cushion or on a chair. Stop thinking and bring your mind down to the level of your navel. When you look at a tree in a storm, if you focus your attention on the top of the tree, you'll see the leaves and the branches blowing wildly in the wind, and the tree will look vulnerable, as though it could be broken at any time. But when you direct your attention down to the trunk of the tree, there's not so much movement. You see the stability. You see that the tree is deeply rooted in the soil and can withstand the storm. When we experience a strong emotion, the mind is agitated like the top of the tree. We have to bring our mind down to the trunk, to the abdomen, and focus all our attention on the rise and fall of the abdomen. This is a great image, and everybody can relate to that, right? You can imagine that branches and leaves moving wildly in the wind, just like your mind. Those thoughts are just swirling, swirling, swirling. But if we imagine that we can bring ourselves back, just like that tree trunk is very sturdy, that we can focus on our abdomen, our breathing, to get out of the mind. So see how that might work for you. Allowing yourself to pay attention and focus on the breath. So this requires stopping, right? Sometimes it's hard to stop. We want to just take that action. We want to maybe we can't get out of our head. We keep the focus on the mind. But just give yourself the grace. Could be 2 minutes, could be 3 minutes. So try that out and see how you like that. This, by the way, is a wonderful book called No Mud, No Lotus. And I'll link to that in the show notes. Another thing that you can do, which is number 4, is release these emotions by writing them down. When I felt a lot of anger after my son's death, when I realized, I talked about this in previous episodes, that I had so much anger that I never resolved from years before, never resolved it. I sat and took a journal and wrote down. I actually wrote a letter and wrote down all my feelings and got that anger out. I never sent the letter. I never did anything with the letter. I think I tore it up or I burned it. I got rid of it. But oh my gosh, what a feeling of relief, of release, just writing that down. Just that action. You know, think about it. When you sit down and you've got your pen or your pencil or whatever you're using, you can actually feel the intensity of that emotion coming out of your hand. Writing really fast, and as you write, maybe your handwriting is big and loopy. Doesn't really matter, because again, this is just for you to get that emotion out. You're not sending it to somebody. It can feel really good. And you may notice that as you progress through this letter and you express your anger, your guilt, your worry, your shame, whatever it is, that all of a sudden towards the end, your handwriting gets back to normal. So I invite you to try that. At any time you feel these emotions echoing or ebbing and flowing, and something just stops you in your tracks because you can't get it out of your head, and it's really hard to move forward, to move on. So let's talk about movement. So that's another thing that we can do. And by the way, my tips for grief relief, I'll link to the show note. I have some of these ideas in that free guide, and you're welcome to download that. And I also have some videos as well. So in the guide, it links to videos, especially for the movement part that I'm going to talk about now. But let's think about movement and how movement helps release grief emotions. And these are things that you might want to do as you're feeling a little bit better, but even in the early days of grief, even in those early weeks and months, it might be helpful to just go for a walk. Be by yourself, go for a walk, hopefully in nature, in a park, on a beach, in the woods, somewhere where you can be out in nature. Breathe some nice fresh air. That is so helpful, being out in nature, drawing from that energy from nature, feeling a cool breeze, touching a tree or the leaf or the bark, or bringing your hands to the water or the sand, having that connection to earth. That's very helpful. And something, again, that you can do at any time during this grief journey. Now, if you are feeling intense emotions, as we were talking about before, like anger, like guilt, like shame, there are very powerful poses that you can do, very powerful movements. And let's try one right now so you can see how this feels. And again, this is something that I demonstrate in the videos that the guide links to. So some of these poses. So one pose that we can take is called wood chopper. And wood chopper, you would be seated or standing, and just let your legs be a little bit wider than hip width apart. And the action is to bring your arms overhead and clasp your fists. Take a nice inhale through the nose, and as you exhale, you're going to bring the arms down in a movement as if you were chopping wood. And as you release down, you can add a sound to that. Ha, or whatever kind of sound you want to add. Releasing emotion, getting anything that might be stuck in the throat with sound is very, very helpful. So that's one thing that you can do, and you can certainly do that anywhere in your house, right? You can do it at any time. But you can also do other actions like that, pounding a pillow, taking a boxing lesson. So think about something that will help you release an emotion that feels very stuck in your body, feels very intense in the body. As we move forward, as we continue to acknowledge emotions, to feel the emotion, to let it go through our journey. Every time we release something, we open the space for possibility. And possibility is opening to hope, to joy, to happiness. So think about maybe cultivating a gratitude practice. This could be something as simple as waking up in the morning and just thanking a higher being for another day, for this next 24 hours that you have. And maybe inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth, and feeling the aliveness, feeling your body wake up. Your gratitude practice could be thanking someone else for support, for the food that you have available to you. There are many ways to cultivate gratitude, but it's something to include in a practice that you can do every day. Every time you release, let that opening be filled with gratitude. Or maybe, and also, joy or happiness. So this 8th tip that I have for you that you can do at any time during your grief journey is to spread kindness. You are suffering, and depending on where you are in your grief journey, it can be very intense, or it can be a little bit lighter. But there's also people around you that could use your kindness. So as you open up, as you release, notice somebody near you, somebody that you can shed a little kindness to. Holding the door open for somebody in the grocery store, allowing a car to come in front of you in traffic. These are just nice things that are kind. And actually, talking about letting another car come in front of you, notice that if you let somebody in traffic, then sometimes that person lets somebody into traffic, or the person behind you lets somebody into traffic. It's kind of interesting, right? So kindness begets kindness. So think about that. So I'd like to close this episode by just reminding you of these 7 actions, 7 things that you can do today to release grief pain, no matter where you are in your grief journey. A counting breath. Making a list. Being present with strong emotions by focusing on your abdomen and the breath going through your body. Releasing by writing down your emotions. Moving the body, taking a walk, taking some yoga classes, finding some movement that will allow you to release strong emotions. Cultivate a gratitude practice. And finally, spread kindness. Thank you for listening to this episode of Growth from Grief. I'll see you next time.